All right, so for number 1, you're plugging the -3 in for x here. Notice that the -3 is going in where the x is, but we still have that negative out front of the x. So when I plug it in, I'll initially write it as a -3 minus 10. Now, some of you, when you did this one, you actually just said, oh, a -3 is 3, and so you went straight there. And while technically correct, I would encourage you to write it up this way. That way, if you make a mistake or are looking back at your work trying to make sure that it's all looking good, you don't see the 3 and think, oh, I forgot the negative, and put it back in when you just canceled it out. By showing this step here, you keep yourself from going and making an error again later. And then once we have 3 minus 10, then it's just a matter of actually doing that subtraction. So we started at a +3, we're going down 10, notice that crosses 0, so we're into the negatives, more precisely a -7. Now for the second problem here, I'm throwing sine in there. First step though, even if you don't remember how to handle this one, even if you don't remember how to handle it, you're going to plug the 0 in for x. So even if you don't remember what sine of 0 is, you can at least give me that much. I see a lot of people who look at it and they say, I don't know how to do everything in this problem from the start, so I'm not going to do it. That's not a good tactic with math. Oftentimes the best tactic with math is do the one thing that you do know. So like I know to plug 0 in for x here. Oftentimes when we do that, we'll then be able to know what the next thing is, even if I didn't know beforehand. Now, some of you though, you are going to get stumped at this point. What is sine of 0? Well, in order to know that, I'm going to bring you back to our unit circle picture. Remember, this is that unit circle we dealt with. And so I'm looking for what sine of 0 degrees is. So that's going to be straight to the right over here. And remember, sine is the y coordinate. It's how far up we're going. And so the sine of 0 then is 0. And that's how we can know it. And you can use the same picture to figure out any of the others as well. Like I could figure out what sine of 90 is, or what cosine of 90 is, and so on. So knowing that sine of 0 is 0, I go ahead and I plug that in. So no more sine. Now I have subtraction and multiplication left in this problem. What do I do first? The subtraction or the multiplication?
Multiplication.
We do the multiplication, yeah, because we're going through the order of operations, PEMDAS. So I'm going to do the 5 times the 0 next. That gives me 0. And then it's going to be 8 minus 0, so it's just 8. So final answer here, f of 0 equals 8. And again, notice I'm still writing that f of 0 equals there. I always want to keep track of that so my work is complete and neat. It often doesn't seem like it to students as they're working through these, but the more you put in those little pieces and keep it straight and consistent, the better and better you actually become at algebra. Next up, we're going to take a look at how to deal with some mental math that's useful when you're out shopping here. So start by writing down this problem, and then I'm going to walk you through how you can do this, again, without calculator. All right, and so this particular problem, I chose this setup because this is actually pretty close to what you're going to see in day-to-day life right now. Last year, the sales tax rate was just below 10%. This year, it's actually just above 10%. But 10% is a really easy number to work with. So it's a nice number to kind of have in mind how to work with because you can just look at it, quickly do some math in your head, and know what to expect. All right, so the shirt costs $45, sales tax is about 10%. So the first thing I want to do is know how much is the tax going to be. That means I need to figure out what 10% of 45 is. Now 10%, well, that's 10 out of 100, which is 1/10. So it happens that 10% is the same as dividing by 10. So really what I'm doing here is I'm going to do 45 divided by 10. Now do you remember how to divide something by 10? The trick that we can know is we actually take our decimal, so I'm going to take my 45, and I'm going to take the decimal that's on the end of that, because it's 45.0, and I'm going to move the decimal one place to the left. And so if I move that one place to the left, that gives me 4.5. So 10% of 45 is 4.5. That's the quick and easy way to get 10% of a number. Now that's our sales tax amount. That's how much additional we have to pay in tax on top of the 45. So if I want to know how much I have to pay total for the shirt, I go ahead and I add that back onto the original price. So I do the 45 plus the 4.5. Now, if you have trouble doing that, the easiest way to visualize it is to line up the numbers so that their decimals are straight above each other. And then you can just add them straight down. So 0 plus 5 is 5. The decimals were lined up because it stays in the same position. 5 plus 4 is 9. And then the 4 plus nothing is 4. And so it gives us 49.5. So I added them up together. I got 49.5, which means that the total cost I'm going to have to pay is going to be about $49.50. Now again, I use 10% as approximation. The actual tax rate is probably more like 10.4% right now or something like that. But it gives us a nice idea so that we know, do we actually have enough money in our pocket? You know, if you have $48 in your pocket, you don't want to get to the cash register and have them ask you for $49.50. So make sure that you're covered on that sort of thing. So it's just one of those tricks that helps. Now, of course, sometimes it also comes down to not just how much cash might you have in your pocket, but budgeting for big items. So we're going to practice that same idea with this problem. So go ahead and write this down, and then we'll work it through. All right, and so to figure this out, we start with $650 price, and then we're going to have to pay an additional 10% tax. So like you're having to save money for a purchase like this. You want to make sure you actually got enough saved to be able to cover the cost of it. The first thing we do is we find out what that 10% of 650 is. Now remember how we can do that. I'm going to take my 650 and I'm going to move the decimal over one place. And so if I do that, that gives me 65. Now as a little side note here, why does it work to just move the decimal over? Well, remember if I take some number, I'm just going to pick a random number here. If I take some number and multiply it by 10, that means I just add a 0 to the end of it. Well, if I'm going the other way, so again, I'll pick some random number here. If I divide it by 10, that means I'm taking off a 0 on the end. The whole moving a decimal thing is doing the exact same idea. It's just by thinking of it as moving the decimal, you can deal with it when there isn't a 0 on the end. All right, so I know my tax is going to be $65. So when I buy this phone, the government gets $65 of my money. If I want to know then how much total I have to pay to walk out the door with this thing, I got to do $650 plus the 65. And again, if you want to actually write that out, figure out what it is, line them up. You always are lining up the right sides because that's where the decimal is. And so 0 plus 5 is 5. 5 plus 6 is 11. So that means a 1 there. And then I carry the 1 from the tens place. So it's $715. So our $650 phone becomes $715 that we're going to have to pay to walk out the door with it.